fix it, make it in the right place.
More or less the same.
Am I in the picture? Am I in the camera?
Yeah.
Of course, that's all that matters. Okay, after a long break, we're going back to Evan-Ezer. Shiurim and Evan-Ezer, you learned for the other program, so we're going to get to this. The last year we spoke about was actually the first year in Hilchos Kedushin, Siman Chav Zayin. Now we're going to continue Siman Chav Zayin and move on to a few other Simanim and discuss different topics that are connected to the Simanim. That we're going to discuss 4 or 5 Simanim today. In Siman Chav Zayin, the end of Sifal, the Ramah over there, the Mechaber says that if the man gives the Kiddushin to the wife, and they're in the time they're talking, Asukim ba'isay inyan, they're discussing something that's connected to Kiddushin. We'll soon see what exactly that means. Then she's a Mekudeshes. And the Ramah says, even if they're not Asukim ba'isay inyan, but even Me'inyan ba'isay inyan, she's also considered Mekudeshes. What's Me'inyan ba'isay inyan? It's a Tzorchei Zivugam. And he brings even a Yashayim that you don't even need that you're talking to her. It's enough if they are talking in front of her about these topics. Yeah. So now, the first difference between the Mechaber and the Ramah is very simple. If they're talking about something which is not, if they were talking about Kiddushin, and then they stopped. They started talking about Tzorchei Zivugam, which is Inyan ba'isay. According to the Mechaber, she's not Mekudeshes Bichlal, and maybe she's not even a Safek Mekudeshes. Why? Because the logic behind it is the fact that he stopped talking about Kiddushin and switched topics and start discussing Tzorchei Zivugam, what kind of furniture they're getting, means that he has already moved his mind away from it, and the fact that he's going to give her something is unrelated to the aspect of Kiddushin. There are those that disagree and say that even according to the Mechaber, she is at least a Safek Mekudeshes. Now, it's obvious that if they're just talking Tzorchei Zivugam, it's not what we're talking about over here. We're obviously talking about that they started talking about Kiddushin, and then they switched gears and started talking about Tzorchei Zivugam. That's when the Shaila begins. According to the Mechaber, the Pashas of the Mechaber is that she's not Mekudeshes. Yeshayim is that she's Safek Mekudeshes. According to the Ramah, she is for sure Mekudeshes. Just a general rule when it comes to Hilchos Even HaEzer, when it comes to Kiddushin, and anything that has to do with these halachas, although in general we say that Ashkenazim follow the Ramah and the Sfardim follow the Mechaber, lahachmir ulahakel, unless there's a specific minhag in your town fakert. When it comes to Inyonei Even HaEzer HaChamurim, the hachra of the vast majority of poskim, the Sfardish poskim, is that if there's a chumrah from the Ramah, it is followed even if the Mechaber holds lahakel. That you'll see it, especially in the later generations, in the poskim in the latest generations, you'll see it quite clearly. And in the Avad Yosef's Shuvas, he brings all the Mekaydas in a few places. He brings the Mekaydas that discuss it, and also Rav Uziel's Shuvas that discuss this topic. That when it comes to Rav Mashash, Rav Uziel, Rav Avad Yosef, all of them have the same idea. That when it comes to Inyonei Arayas, Inyonei Kiddushin, these kinds of things, if there is a chumrah from the Ramah on the Mechaber, and it's then b'derech klal we follow the chumras of, even the Sfardim will follow the chumras of the Ramah. L'mayin hafkamina for you is if you're asked a shaila, you're paskening for a person who follows the Mechaber, it doesn't mean that in this you would say, oh, yesh ayim, that she's not Mekudeshes. It means that, yesh ayim, she's Safek Mekudeshes, and but the Lamaisa tried to follow the chumras of the Ramah. Now back to what we're talking about. If they were not talking about Kiddushin Bichlal, and they were only talking about Inyonei Tzorchei Zivugam, Kuli alma, she's not mekudeshes, even misofik. For a simple, common reason, how would she know that when they're talking about furniture, for buying furniture for getting married, that the purpose is that he wants to be mekadesh her right now? Now, if she is already meshudeches loy, and they were talking about the shidduch, and he did not speak specifically about kedushin, there is a discussion if he then gives her and she doesn't say anything, if she's mekudeshes or not. According to the Rashba, it's not considered inyonei kedushin that she should become mekudeshes, and therefore even if he gives her a ring afterwards, she's not mekudeshes. There is a Tzela Kesef, I think Shmuel Arditi, his name is, that if they spoke about Inyonei Shidduchim and right afterwards he gave a ring, then she is considered Mekudeshes because it was right away connected to the topic of Shidduchim, but that's only the Tzela Kesef. Like I told you, the Rashba says it's not considered, the Ma'arik also says, the Simon Kufayin says it's also not considered Lashon Kiddushin. She was already Meshudeches, and they were discussing topics connected to the Meshudochim.
Not speaking about anything.
No, that's another thing. Now, then there are those that says that if she is already Meshudeches and they did not speak anything, and he went and he gave her a ring without any other discussion beforehand, it's obvious that after a shidduch comes Kedushin. And therefore, sometimes it could be a week later, sometimes it could be a month later, sometimes it could be 2 days later. And only when he was speaking about Kedushin and then he switches gears and talks about something else, that's when we say that we start having a shaila. But if she was Meshudeches, then it continues. Now, according to the Ramah, this is all according to Mechaber. According to the Ramah, if they spoke of Inyan Kedushin and then they started speaking about Tzorchei Zivugam, Tzorchei Zivugam means needs of the marriage, which, like I said, they're buying furniture, they're talking about how much Nadunya he's getting, talking about how much jewelry they're getting, if he's bringing this fields into this property, that property, who's going to be responsible for laundry, who's going to be doing cooking, all these kinds of things. That is not a change. According to the Ramah, that is not a strong enough change that changes the topic that was discussed before, which is Kedushin. Rather, it's a continuation, a natural continuation. We're talking about Kedushin, so obviously what comes after Kedushin is that life begins. So you're going to move into a new apartment, you have to have furniture, you have to have a bed, you have to have a mirror. You know, before you're married, the bacher doesn't need a mirror. After he's married, somebody in the house needs a mirror, not the bacher, not the chassan, but somebody needs it. So therefore, they have to discuss it. So it's part of the same conversation. So according to Ramah, that's part of it, and she is considered mekudeshes. There are those achroinim which hold that being that the Ramah wrote me'iskei shidduchim, therefore there is some that hold that any form of nesinas tabas that comes after any discussion which is marriage related, whether it's shidduchim or anything of the sort, is she becomes a safek mekudeshes, which this brings into.
Where is this?
It's not. No, I meant tzorchei zivugam. Being that they discussed, the talking in any form of giving a ring, which is connected to a discussion that's related to marriage, she's safek mekudeshes. There are some achrim which take this somewhat of an extreme position on the matter, which is could be that is the reason why the Rebbe wrote in the Meine, and I think the Meine became popular recently because it was only published a few years ago, that before it was known only Baal Peh, that between a chuppah, between a shidduch and a chuppah, there should not be, the gift should not be a ring, not to give them what's called the engagement ring.
Who said this? Who's that trying to say this?
I have to find them, I don't remember now. Well, there is such a shidduch in the Achreinim. I didn't write down which one it was, so that's a problem.
All of these opinions that you're mentioning are all to make her safek mekudeshes or mekudeshes?
No, so the ones that hold that tzorchei zivugam the ones that, according to Ramah, tzorchi zivugam after Kiddushin is vada mekudeshes. Shaila is only according to Mechaber. But when we go to the next, the Chachamim would say that tzorchi zivugam without Kiddushin first. That all these Safek Mekudeshes are scenarios which did not start with a Dibur Me'inyan Kiddushin. They started with a Dibur Me'inyan Shidduchim, a Dibur Me'inyan Tzorchi Zivugam, things that are not Kiddushin. Kiddushin is the giving of the ring, discussing the Kiddushin. In Seif Beis, it discusses other kinds of lashonis which could be understood to be kiddushin. For example, he says, I purchased you, you're arusasi, birshusi, you're my property, lekuchasi, all these kinds of lashonis, you're ishti, you're my wife, mekudeshes. And the Ramah right away tells you it's only if she understood what he's saying. The Lashon Mekudesh is different, but all the other Lashonis is only if she understood what he was saying, or that first they discussed actual Kiddushin, and then he gives her a ring as Ha'aret Ishti. But if he doesn't give it, if not, then she has to at least understand what it means. What does it mean, understand? There's an Avnei Miluim, and Rabbi Kiva here in Sifkat and Vav, and there's Rabbi Kiva Eger over here also, that when it means that she understood on all these Lashonis, which is not a Reit Mekudeshes, all the other Lashonis, it means that you asked her, the Rav asks her afterwards, did you understand that by him saying Hareyat Ishti and giving you a ring, you became a Kodeshes? And she says, yes, that's how I understood it. That means the Hevina Dvorav is not something which you have to guess. Something that she has to confirm. These Lashonis, as opposed to Lashonis that are in Sif Aleph, which over there the discussion of Lashonis that she for sure understands that she is Mekudeshes. Because over here, these Lashonis are not Lashonis which are standard Lashonis of Mekudeshes. These are other Lashonis which might mean Mekudeshes. And therefore, you have to make sure that she understands. Now, in these kinds of Lashonis, if she says she did not understand that it means Mekudeshes, then according to the Bach, she's definitely not Mekudeshes, because these are not standard Kiddushin Lashonis, and there are those that disagree. But when he says Hareyat Mekudeshes, that's clear, that's a Lashon that everybody understands it means Kiddushin, and therefore she is Mekudeshes. The Taz over here says that if she went under the chuppah, it makes no difference what kind of Lashon, whether it's a Lashonis in Sif Aleph or Lashonis in Sif Beis, we don't have to ask her if she understood what it means. The fact that she stood under the chuppah and she received a ring, and she heard some kind of statements in Hebrew, and those statements might imply Kiddushin, it's enough of a raya that she has no longer any claim that she did not understand what she was doing, what was told to her. If you did not understand what was told to you, it makes no difference. The mere fact you walked under the chuppah, you knew what you're going in there. Vadai. Now, there are Lashonis which are Safek in the actual Lashon, if the Lashon means Kiddushin. Over here, Hareyat Lekochasi, you are my purchase, that's something which is understood as Kiddushin also. Some people understand Kiddushin that they purchase a wife. And but the are Lashonis which the actual Lashon is a Safek. For example, Miyu'edes, Miyuchedes, these kinds of Lashonis, these are not specific meaning of Kiddushin, and therefore in such scenarios she is Mekudeshes Misafek only if there was Dibur Mi'iske Kiddushin beforehand. The Ramah adds, if he gives it to her and he says it's for Ava, for love, or for these kinds of things, it's also considered a Safek. Now, any of these Lashonis, if she says that she accepted it for the purpose of Kiddushin, she is Safek Mekudeshes. Now, if he gives it to her and he doesn't say anything, the Machlekes HaPoskim, she's Mekudeshes Vada, she's Mekudeshes Safek, she's Bechanat Mekudeshes. if there was no talk whatsoever, because you have no edus which could come and tell you what the husband was thinking when he gave a ring without saying anything. There is a Atzei Arozim which says that this whole discussion, all these Lashonos that Ramah is talking about, is only when she was already a Meshudeches, because then, obviously, that she's discussing, if he's saying something, it has a connection to the marriage. Otherwise, if she's not a Meshudeches, if he goes over to a woman in the street and says, Hareit mi Yu'edesli, and he gives her a ring, Lav Dafka, that she is Mekudeshes. Now, in any case when there is a Suffolk Mekudeshes and he gave her a ring, it's not enough that he goes and he says, oh, I made a mistake in the word, I meant to say, instead of saying Meyuedes, I meant to say Mekudeshes. He actually has to reacquire the ring and then give it to her, and then those that say no, you don't have to reacquire the ring. You could just fix the lashon, because if it's all part of the same discussion. Comes Sif Daled with one of the most important things that are relevant over here, and he says Harei at Mekodeshes and does not say the word li. According to the Mechaber, she's completely not Mekodeshes. The Ramah says Yesh Omer that she's Safek Mekodeshes. The Ikar Kisvara Rishena that she is not Mekodeshes. There are those that hold that she's Safek Mekodeshes, but the Ikar is the Kisvara Rishena. Unless they were talking Me'iskei Kiddushin. If they're talking Me'iskei Kiddushin, then we have Yodayim Mechichos. You have a clear proof that that he was planning on being Mekadesher, and he was Mekadesher. Why is that? Because we have Yadayim Mechichos that they were talking about Iskei Kiddushin, and he is talking to her. So obviously, if he says Harei at Mekudeshes right after having a discussion that I'm going to marry you, then obviously that means that it's Li. It's not anybody else. There is. What's the real suffix over here behind it? If he says Harei at Mekudeshes, let's say Li. Maybe at Mekudeshes was planning to somebody else. He had in mind somebody else. He had in mind that he's been Mekadosh on behalf of somebody else. The Shas Truas Imri David says that today that there's no more Kiddushin al Yidei Shliach for all practical purposes. It becomes even a bigger shaila if not saying Li she's not Mekodeshes. It's not like it used to be in the olden days that you could have in mind somebody else. The fact if he says Harei at Mekodeshes today, nobody says Harei at Mekodeshes to be Mekadesh for somebody else. So obviously when he says Harei at Mekodeshes, it means to him. It doesn't mean to anybody else, but he doesn't say it. Conclusion. The Chalkas Mechoikik says that even according to the Mechaber, whether they say, even if both are going to come and say that we had in mind Kiddushin, if he did not say the word Li, she is not Mekudeshes. The Beis Shmuel brings the Marshdam that says that even according to Mechaber, you have to be Machmer. The Chasam Sofer mentions if you made a hefsek between Harei at Mekudeshes and the word Li, that she is not Mekudeshes. That's a Chasam Sofer, and that's what Pischat Shuvah brings the Chasam Sofer, and his grandson, the Ksav Sofer, grandson, right? His son, and disagrees with him and says that she is Mekudeshes. So at least you got to know about a little bit of a family fight about this topic. There are those that say that if she's already Meshudeches, since once she's Meshudeches and he says Harei at Mekudeshes and doesn't say the word Li, it already helps because we have the same Yodayim Mechichos, we have the clear proof that he had in mind to be Mekadesh her for himself, and that's a lotion of Kiddushin, that's the Marival and the Marashdam, and the Marit says that she's not Mekudeshes, and the Aruch HaShulchan takes the middle road between the two and says, we're not going to follow the Marit that she's not Mekudesh, we're not going to follow the Marit Baal that she is Mekudesh, we're going to say that she is Safek Mekudeshes. I mentioned before that if she stands under the chuppah and she hears a different lashon Harei at Miyu'edes Li, it is considered Kiddushin. If he says Harei at Mekudeshes and does not say Li under the chuppah, common sense would dictate that she is Mekudeshes. Because obviously, why is she standing under the chuppah to him, and why is he giving her a ring under the chuppah, and he's saying Harei Mekudeshes, and he has in mind somebody else. If he tells her, if he tells her, Harei ani Bailech, I am your husband, or then it's nothing, even if they were talking about Iski Kiddushin. Because the act of Kiddushin is ki yikach ish isha, is the act of yikach, Kiddushin, Mekudeshes li. Over here, when he says, Harei ani Ba'alech, I am your husband, rather than saying, you are Mekudeshes to me, there is no act of ki yikach. If there's no act of ki yikach, then she is not Mekudeshes. When he says, I am your husband, in other words, he's saying that she took him as a spouse, and that's not Kiddushin. Kiddushin is that he takes her as a wife, not that she takes him as a husband. It's a big problem. If it happens one after another, there's a machlikus, and if it's Kiddushin or not. L'maisa, that's one of the in certain scenarios we will be makel in such if they say that. And now what happens is, if he says first Harei Mekudeshes li, v'harei, and then I am Bailech. That means he says, you're Mekudeshes to me, and I will be your husband. And the Sefer HaMakna says it's not Kiddushin, because it's Safek Kiddushin, because he says both. He says a loshon of ki yikach, and he says a loshon that she's taking him. The Aruch HaShulchan says it all depends which one you say first. If you say first your part, Harei Mekudeshes li, then it works, because you already said the loshon hamoyel. Even though afterwards you continue and said, and I will be your husband. But if he says, I will be your husband, and you are Mekudeshes to me, then it's Safek Mekudeshes, not Vadei Mekudeshes. Sif Zayin, if she gives him something, and she says, I am Mekudesh to you, she is not Mekudeshes, because we still don't have the topic of ki yikach. And if they were talking about Iske Kiddushin, there are those that say that it's a Safek Mekudeshes, because it might be considered that he gave and she said, Nasan hu ve'omrahi. Yeah, and that is in Sif Ches, that he gives the ring and she says, I am Mekudesh to you. She doesn't say, I am being Mekadesh you, you are becoming my husband, that she's acquiring him, but he gives the ring and then she says, I hereby become Mekudesh to you. Then if they were talking about Iske Kiddushin, then there is she's Mekudeshes, and if not, she becomes a Safek Mekudeshes. Obviously, if the husband says, yes, I do, yes, I agree, then she is for sure Mekudeshes, because he responded like approving what she said, that she just became Mekudesh to him with that ring that he gave her. And then there is the act of ki yikach over here, despite the fact that the words were said in a different form. If he gives first and he says, and then she says something back to him, she responds to him, then it's also not a problem, because there is no contradiction between what he said, Harei Mekudeshes li, to what she responded, Harei Mekudeshes lacha. She didn't say no. Ani Harei ata Mekudesh li. That she didn't say that. It's not mevat what it is. That is the points that are relevant to Siman Chav Zayin. I want to move on to Siman Lamed Aleph. What do you use for Kiddushin? Kiddushin have to be Shave Pruta, something which is Shave Pruta. Shave Pruta is not that much. Anything less than Shave Pruta doesn't have the effect of Kiddushin. Even if she agrees to be Niskadish in something which is Pachas Mishave Pruta, is still not enough. Why? Because it's not Kesef. One of the forms of Kiddushin is Kiddushay Kesef. And less than Shave Pruta, less than the Pruta is not Kesef. If Unless not that prut is not kesef, then the act of kedushin has never happened in this matter. Now, if he was mekadesh her with something rather than a coin, then you don't have to start calculating what the value is. If afterwards you went and you calculated and it's a shava prut, she's obviously mekudeshes. And if afterwards you calculated the value of it and it's not a shava prut, she's obviously not mekudeshes. What? No, certain things are not worth more than shava prut wherever you go. If it's something which is hard to determine the value, you have a ring, not a ring, you have a diamond. Diamonds, the value of a diamond to somebody who has no idea in diamonds, he will not be able to guess the accurate value of diamonds. The value of a diamond is determined by shape, by color, by cleanliness, and by size, weight, and where it comes from. And somebody who is not a baki in these things has no clue what it is. So if the man says to the woman, I am mekadesh you with this diamond which is worth kach v'kach, then you have to do a shuma to make sure that that's the worth of it, because maybe she only agreed to be niskadesh because he told her, I'm being mekadesh you with this diamond ring which is worth $10,000, and then she's going to go and find out from the store that it's only worth $600. It wasn't even a diamond; it was a lab diamond, and it might be nicer and cleaner, but it's a lab diamond. Then then she is not mekudeshes. And there are those which say that you always need a shuma in these, and you always need an evaluation when it comes to these kinds of things, because maybe he makes a mistake. Therefore, the minhag is always to be mekadesh with a ring that has nothing on it, and therefore you don't get into the issue that's something which you need a mumche to be mashayr what the value is. By doing a ring, a simple gold ring, that is something which is much simpler to find out the value of it. You take it, you put it on a scale, you know how much it weighs, you go into Google, you search what the value of the gold is on that day, and that's it, and you know what it's worth. It's not rocket science. There is a value to it, plus a certain percentage for the labor, but there is a easy way of calculating the value of it. If
what do you do in a circumstance where you do a chuppah and for example, from they bought this very fancy ring to the tradition that has diamonds on it?
You make sure that she's mekudeshes with it regardless of value.
You tell her that she should
willing to accept it regardless of value, yeah. That people come to the wedding with a ring that they got from the Baba, and it's very sentimental, and it's a shaila b'chal the yerush, it belongs to a separate discussion, but moving that discussion aside, you have to make sure that she knows what she's getting, and she's ready to be niskadesh with it, regardless whether the value is $5,000 or $1,000 or $10,000. If it's something which is not clear what it is, and he was mekadesh with it, and it was something that she might have been mistaken to think it's something else, a gold-plated ring rather than a real gold ring, then she's not mekudeshes. So shaila, it's not mekudeshes. It might be a suffix mekudeshes. It's probably not mekudeshes because he fooled her. She thought she's being niskadesh in a gold ring. Now, if it's something which is clear that it's not, and he gives her a copper ring, and so then she can't say afterwards, "Oh, I thought that I'm being niskadesh with a golden ring, and therefore there's no kedusha." No, it's clear. Nobody sees a copper ring and thinks that it's gold. In Siman Lamed Daled, they have the Seder, is essentially what the Seder of the Chuppah is. By Kiddushin, then you make Birchos Eirusin, and I'm not going to get into it now, there's a Machlokes Rishonim, if Kiddushin is an independent mitzvah, or it's a mitzvah, or it's only a part of mitzvah, it's only part of mitzvah's Pru Revu, but regardless, you make a bracha, you make a bracha on the Kiddushin. Birchas Eirusin. The Kala stands to the right of the Chassan, they face Mizrach. The minhag already became that the Rav is the one who makes the Birchas Eirusin, just for the fact that nobody, not to be mevayish somebody who is a chassan who is unable to do it. Based on that, I don't know why people give brachas under the chuppah to people who can't read. They're mevayish them, but that they're not the one who brings the skadish, so it's not a problem. Obviously, you're here in the shiurim of Rav Bar Shalom, make a bracha. You're not allowed to make a bracha if the Rav has to make sure at least the people that are in front of him under the chuppah are tznius, otherwise you can't make a bracha. A bracha is done on a cup of wine under the chuppah. You have in mind the Rav has to have in mind to be moitzi the chassan, and some people say that, and also the chassan has to have in mind to be yoitze with the birkas eirusin that the Rav is doing. Yesh oimrim that also the kala should have in mind, but the majority of people say you don't need to do it there. But anyways, we say you shouldn't say baruch hu baruch shmai on it, and the chassan and kala take a sip from the wine. The cup should be a cup that has some, it shouldn't be just a plastic garbage cup. It should be, doing a mitzvah, it should be a nice cup, fill it up to the top. It should have at least a revius in it, and some say that you should dafka have red wine because red wine is red and it's more mehuder, and some people are more practical and they say use white wine because then at least she's not going to have a backup gown with if the wine spills on her. If you forget to do the Birkas Eirusin before the Kiddushin, then you don't do a bracha afterwards. That's what the Mechaber says, and the Ramah says that you can. L'chatchila, you have to have a minyan for Birkas Eirusin. A minyan doesn't mean 10 men over bar mitzvah. It means 10 people over there. It means not everybody's counted the chas, not 10 and not 10 outside the men. It means 10 including the chassan and the rav and everybody else. Some people say that they have to be Shemer Shabbos, and today we're no longer makpid on it in places where we cannot be makpid on it. There's a machlokes rishonim if the 10 men is me'akev for the Birkas Eirusin or not, and b'diavad the achra is a b'diavad that does work for Birkas Eirusin, but not b'shar brachas. You cannot say without a minyan. But Shabbat can't say without a minyan, and Birkas Eirusin definitely has to be with a minyan. And I have already seen Rabbanim that if somebody says he does not want to have a chuppah with 10 people, it's one, or doesn't want any other of the minhagim of going around in a circle or all the other things, you just tell them this is the Orthodox wedding, you do it the right way, or I'm not doing the wedding for you. Now, if people are going to think and say, well, there's ultimately you have 10 people, it's only l'chatchila, but the evidence is still fine. So it's referred to you the memories of Rebbe Tzimchana, Chayveres Chof Hey. There is a story from 1935, which is the height of communist redifus. In the midnight, a couple came to Rebbe Levi Yitzchak to make a chuppah. And Levi Yitzchak started, Rebbe Tzimchana writes a story. Levi Yitzchak started the hachanas to the chuppah. He had to find a minyan. And she writes, Rebbe Tzimchana writes, a minyan, anders hat nicht gewollt mit seiner Kedushin sein. He's not going to make a chuppah otherwise. Took a half hour to find the minyan. The 10th Jew was the guy in the building who was in charge and telling the government who got in trouble, who did the wrong things. He was dragged into the minyan, and at 1:30 in the morning the chuppah was over. But if Rabbi Yitzchak was able to do it in Yekaterinoslav 1935 under Stalin, I don't think that anybody else has any excuse to say that they're not interested in a minyan. The Chatchila, obviously the 10 people are supposed to hear the brachas. The minig is to stand when you hear this bracha. Same thing with Sheva brachas under the chuppah. The Chatchila, everybody should be standing. In Siman Lamed Hey, Sif Aleph, it says that you could do Kiddushin through a Shliach, but it's better to be Mekadosh by yourself. And again, like I told you, it's for many years that there's no concept of Kiddushin al Yidei Shliach. The only time I heard this as a Svara, not as a Maise, was during Corona, that Chassan was in one place and the Kala was in another place, and somebody says maybe Mekadosh through a Shliach, but they didn't do it. Figure out a way to be...
What would be the point of doing?
Shemek de Menach, yeah. I want to discuss a few short Tzemach Tzedeks that I mentioned a few short Tzemach Tzedeks last time. I'm going to go through some short Chuvas, and some Chuvas are long, but the points I want to discuss are short, that are connected to the topics of Kedushin that we discussed, and most of them we discussed so far. One of them we didn't really discuss. I'm going to bring it up. In Siman Even Oezer, Siman Tzadik Ches of the Tzemach Tzedek, the Rav asked the Chassan before the chuppah, "Is the ring yours?" And he said, "Yes." And then it was nisbarer that the ring didn't belong to him; it belonged to a goy who lent the ring to him and wants the ring back. He doesn't want payment. And the Rav said that she's not mekudeshes. And over there, the Tzemach Tzedek explains that even in the Matana Nasla Hachzer, if she does not want to give it back, then the Kiddushin are bottle, and that's why Tzemach Tzedek over there towards the end of the Tshuva writes that there was a minig that I think I mentioned last year, that Shamash had a ring that he would give to as a present to the Mekadosh, and would come pick it up the next day. Yeah, the Kal knew about it. There's a series of Shuvas, Siman Kuf Hey, Kuf Vav, Kuf Zayin, which are discussed. Yeah, but this is a ring. No. It's like Kiddush Kesef, but it's a Shavei Kesef. That's what's fine. Kufei Kuvav Kuf Zayin is when he said Lashon Kiddushin, and then he comes afterwards and he says that he was joking, and she says she does not understand. Siman Kuf Zayin, over that Tzemach Tzedek goes into a whole discussion, and Ois Gimel, and Siman Kuf Zayin, Ois Gimel, it's a very long choice, I'm not going to go into them now, that when the Beis Yosef says that when the Chassan says Hareyat Mekudeshes Li, she is no longer trusted to say that she didn't understand, it's only when everybody knew what the words Hareyat Mekudeshes Li, and then she's not Neman to say that she did not understand, and she's not Neman even, and it's not even a Safek Kiddushin, it's a Vadei Kiddushin. But the Tzemach Tzedek says that ultimately it's still, you can still look at it as a Safek, Mitzad the Bach, and another Safek is, in that story, she did not receive a ring, she received a coin, and she might have not understood the words that he exactly said. If you look in the story, maybe she thought she's getting something that really belonged to her, etc. And therefore, over there, the Tzemach Tzedek was mekel. But the concept is to say, if you have a case when he says he was joking, and she says that she didn't understand, and it was the right l'shainis, just by saying she didn't understand is not going to save her. But you have to create this fake. So Tzemach Tzedek started with a suffix. It may be fart as a suffix if it's something which is not understood. Now, the one more Tzemach Tzedek I mentioned the last time, that I'm going to speak about it in this year. It's been a while. Siman Kuf Yud Beis in the Tzemach Tzedek. It was a story where he said Hareyat Mekodeshes and did not say li. That according to almost all the poskim, she is not mekudesh, she doesn't need a get, even the chumrah. But there are yeshayimim that she's mekudeshes, mesafik, and the Bach has a suffix on it. So over here, the Tzemach Tzedek goes and in this long tshuva in Siman Kufid Beis built 7 or 8 sfeikas. Aside for the first one, he says, ultimately to just rely on this one because you have the Bach, if we would need to, we would rely just on this one. But he gives a bunch of 7 or 8 sfeikas one after another. And one of the timing was very interesting, that the money is not really his. Why is it? The money that he used for Kiddushin was not, he was Mekadesh with cash, and wasn't really his, with coins, it wasn't really his money. Therefore there's no Kiddushin for sure. Why? It was money that didn't belong to him, it belonged to his friend, and he was Mekadesh without his friend's approval. What was the story? He received money, the Chassan received cash from 2 people, 2 Yidden. That money was given to him for the purpose of him going to the kontor, which is what we spoke in Hilchas Pesach, the guy that was in charge of the mashka distribution in town, to give it to him as a loan. The guy who ran the mashka distribution in town, who had the license, needed the loan. And these 2 Yidden went to invest with him. And they sent the chassan to bring the cash. And on the way to the place, he found the girl, he gives her the money, he said, let me kodesh with this cash. So that how could you be Mekudeshes? He had no right to take the money. It wasn't a loan to him. It wasn't alva that leitzanitna. It wasn't a sheila. He was a shliach because he had a pekadon that he had to bring. And if he takes it, he is a gazlan. So therefore, she's not Mekudeshes. And then the Tzemach Tzedek says, and even if he would have received the money as a heteriske, still there's still tzarich if she's Mekudeshes or not. Why? A heteriske by definition is palga milve, palga pekadon. Every heteriske is built, predicated upon the idea that half of the money I received as a loan. Say I take $100,000, 50,000 I received as a loan, which that I pay back without interest, without anything, because it's also, and the other half I took as a pikadon, I received as a pikadon for the purpose of investing on this guy's behalf, and then the profits are shared. That's the whole idea of a heteriska. The half which I received as a pikadon, I'm for sure not allowed to use. It doesn't belong to me. I'm not allowed to use for Kiddushin. It was given to me for the purpose of doing business. The half which was given to me as a milva, l'chatchila, it's also to use money of a heterisk, for hoitzaisav. This is some of the ones that were here, remember it, David or Mendy, whoever was here 3 years ago. And if he went and he spent all the money, and he used all these $100,000 that he went to be Mekadesh this woman, then he used the half pekadon which doesn't belong to him. So that's for sure a problem. For sure stole half of the money. He's Mekadesh with Gezel. So he says, maybe it was Gzei Lachash and Nisyasha Abailam. How is it Gzei Lachash and Nisyasha Abailam? What Yush was there over here? Not Yush from receiving the money. When you receive a money by heteriske, a bag of coins, the guy who gave you the heteriske is miyash from these actual coins. He will never receive these coins back. He will receive other coins, and this, but he was nisyash from the guf of these money. So therefore, maybe it does work because Taka was gzela, but it was after Yush. There's Yush also. So if there was Yush, he was already koinet. It became his as a gzela, but it became his. Therefore, maybe the Kiddushin does work. And maybe even though l'chatchila you're not supposed to use the money, the other half, b'hoitzoisav, bepoil, if you do use it b'hoitzoisav, there are opinions that show that it's fine, because the person who gives the money, even though he gives officially heter iske, and this is something which you'll see in Tzemach Tzedek and Hilchos also. Officially, it's heter iske for the purpose of business, but we all know what it's for. he's not giving you the money because he knows that you're going to do a good investment. He's giving you the money because he's relying on you that you're going to pay him back and you're going to give him profits. Because another thing concludes that when it comes to iskis tzarechim, but in the story over here that he was discussing, the money was for sure not his. So that's one of the reasons that she is not mekudeshes. And he says, putting all these fakes together, plus the original suffix that he didn't even say li, then she is for sure not mekudeshes. It's a very interesting tshuva, Siman Kufid Beis. If you do get around to read it, you will greatly enjoy it. With that, we conclude the share for today in Hilchos Kiddushin.